Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Worldview truth.
Is that all truth is relative to a group or individual. Truth is what is for you, is what you want to make of it. But maybe it may not be true for somebody else. Most of us in this room believe that there is a standard of truth that can be identified in a biblical context. In today's culture, you can identify as anything and anyone that you choose. You may select your gender. In fact, in New York City, there's a total of 31 genders that you can choose. And it's legally protected in the state of New York. You may do anything or identify as anything that you want to identify as. You can identify as a cat. You can identify as a dog. Recently, in Hernando County, Florida, there is a teacher that is now identified as a mermaid. I'm not sure how that works, but that's where we're at. Postmodern philosophy has moved into all aspects of the American family and religion toward a belief system that there is no absolutes, and truth is whatever you want to make it to be. If an individual or group or religion attempts to live by universal principles of truth, they are targeted as being inherently oppressive and intolerant. This postmodern philosophy has inserted its influence in all aspects of American culture, religion, and government. In recent times, we've seen the power of major corporations pushing these agendas through product marketing, internal employee control, social media organizations that are canceling those who speak out or have a different point of view. Ultimately, the family carries the brunt of this philosophy, and it's been forced on the American people. While the family is the foundation of society, the influences of government, entertainment, education, media, and business are destroying the absolute truths. Today, we have a fantastic panel, and I'm going to go just real briefly. I'm going to go through each of our panel members. And then after that, I'm going to ask each of you just to give like a 3-minute overview of your organization and some of the battles that you're fighting. It's 3 minutes, so you're going to have to make it very, very brief. First of all, to my right, we have Patty Sullivan. She has worked in organizational management, consulting, and leadership development for 35 years. Since 2012, Patty has served as a state coordinator for Parental Rights Florida, working with Florida legislators to pass good parental rights laws for Florida families. In 2018, she presented a simple rights language to Representative, now Senator Aaron Graw. Representative Graw became a principal sponsor of Parents' Bill of Rights. Patty then mobilized a grassroots movement of Florida parents to support the Parents' Rights Bill and engagement in the legislative process. After a 3-year push, the Parental Bill of Rights passed and was signed into law by Governor DeSantis in 2021. The bill emerged as law just as a nationwide parental rights movement began to take shape. The parental rights movement and legislation continue to make progress across the nation. Patty also serves on the National Board of Parental Rights Foundation. Parentalrights.org is a website. She continues to serve as a valuable resource within the parental rights movement for local, state, and national organizations. She provides parents and citizens with understanding of parental rights issues, being engaged in the legislative process. Patty is married to Jim for 34 years. Their beautiful miracle daughter was born at the 17-year mark of their marriage. And then also to my right, we have Roger Gannam. He's Assistant Vice President of Legal Affairs for Liberty Counsel, an international nonprofit litigation, education, and policy organization dedicated to advancing religious freedom, the sanctity of life, and the family. With offices in Florida, Virginia, and Washington, D.C., Liberty Counsel fulfills its Christian mission through many projects and initiatives, including strategic litigation in state and federal courts. Roger grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, the great-grandson of a Lebanese Christian immigrant who came to America in 1910, seeking freedom from oppression, Ottoman rule. Growing up in a Navy family, Roger earned a bachelor's degree in finance from the University of North Florida and a law degree with honors from University of Florida Levin College of Law. Roger spent the first 6 years of his career in Jacksonville with 2 international law firms, gaining extensive experience in complex business litigation and class actions. Roger spent the next 8 years with a Jacksonville firm where he became a partner and expanded his practice to include religious liberty cases and advising public officials in publics on free speech, religious liberty, and other constitutional matters. Roger joined Liberty Counsel in 2012 after sensing God's call to take up the full-time defense of our most cherished freedoms. Since then, Roger has participated in strategic litigation involving biblical marriage, pro-life, religious freedom, and religious free exercise, including many critical cases challenging the discriminatory censorship of young counselors and religious worship. Roger has appeared on a number of Fox News, of television and radio and print media outlets, including CNN, bless you for that, Fox News, NPR, and New York Times. Roger and his wife, Joy, raise their son and daughter in Central Florida. And then we have also, over here to my right, Karen Jaroch. She graduated from the University of South Florida with an engineering degree and worked in a major defense contractor in Orlando area before becoming a full-time stay-at-home mom to her and her husband, Mike, Mike's 4 children. Let me rephrase that. Let me say that again. You weren't the mom to your husband. You were the mom to the 4 children. Okay, we've got that straight. All right. In 2009, I'm going to get in trouble, I can tell. In 2009, she followed her passion in politics and volunteered for conservative candidates and causes, which eventually morphed into a full-time work. For the past 10 years, Karen has been the Florida State Director for Heritage Action, an advocacy arm of Heritage Foundation. And then to my immediate left, we have Rebecca Ricks. She's been active in politics and in community since college, including working for several politicians. She is the founder of Moms for Medical Freedom and the president of Florida Moms for America, whose mission is to build the foundation of liberty in the homes of America through the Mothers of America to raise a new generation of patriots and heal our nation from inside out, And then, last but not least, we have, to my left, we have Keith Flaugh. He's a retired IBM executive, years of experience in finance and marketing. His education includes a BS in forestry science and an MBA. He is a U.S. Army veteran. He considers himself a U.S. original constitutionalist and is fed up with how our political system has been hijacked by both monopoly parties and the federal government. Their policies and abuse of our U.S. Constitution are bankrupting us morally and financially. Keith is Managing Director of Florida Citizens Alliance, which in 4 short years have become a respected advocate for K-12 education reform in Florida based on the fundamental values and principles of liberty, which Keith pursues with unrelenting passion. I'm going to get you to just give a really, really fast overview of your organization. I'm going to start to my left with Rebecca Riggs and just give us, and I'm going to pass the mic and you can just, in 3 minutes though, okay, 3 minutes. Here we go.
Kind of an overview of what our organization has done.
Yes.
Okay, so Moms for America, we believe Florida Moms for America says that every issue is a mom issue. So every single thing that goes on in legislation every day affects us. And so we want to make sure that we are an advocate or a voice for moms all across the state. And as I look around at the people at this table, a lot of you, Patty does parental rights and Keith does education, the things that Keith has done. We want to come alongside and be the support for that. We want to be the moms who are on the background, who are on the ground, because moms sometimes can't do everything. Not every mom can go to Tallahassee, but you can. Not every mom can get up and do all the things, speak, but we can do a lot from home. We can make phone calls, we can support. We want to be the support for that. So this year, really, in the past year, we took a big part in HB1, which is school choice bill, and I really feel like God opened doors for us to be able to talk to legislators about different things, and have us come in and speak about homeschooling and why that was really important to us, and things like that. Right now, for our next coming year, we are working on some legislation for human trafficking, and especially child trafficking here in Florida, to make sure those things are stopped. And I still have a heart for medical freedom, and that was one of the very first things. I feel like in the last 3 years, everybody at this table has been in crisis mode. There have been crisis after crisis after crisis that we've had to fix. And so we've just tried to come alongside a lot of the groups who have that. So sometimes not everybody can be an expert. Not every mom can be an expert in everything, but we can be a help. We can be a voice, and we can come alongside to support that. So that is really our mission, because we think the mom is the heart of the home, and the home is the heart of our community. And if you can reach your homes, you can reach your community. And that starts all the way up from voting to making sure our right legislation gets passed. So that's really my heart, and our goal of our organization is to support these other organizations who can go and do that, and make sure that our voices are there to be heard in the future.
Okay, my name is Karen Jaroch. I'm with an organization called Heritage Action. We are the advocacy arm of the Heritage Foundation. That is a conservative think tank based in Washington, whose goal is to see freedom, opportunity, and prosperity flourish in our great nation. So education is definitely one of our policy planks. We are involved in other areas. We are looking to secure our borders. We work on elections, reversing the spending and regulations that are coming out of Washington, D.C., countering the threat of China, communist China, big tech policy, and last but not least, probably first, is protecting unborn and family formation, which I think we're going to talk a little bit about today. Thank you.
My name is Keith Flaugh. I'm a co-founder of Florida Citizens Alliance. We're a grassroots coalition, and now over 250,000 Floridians, two-thirds of which are parents with kids 17 or under in the home. We focus in 3 pillars. We focus in the legislative pillar. We have 2.8 million kids in government schools in Florida. 50% of them cannot read at grade level or do math at grade level, and 75% of our third graders cannot read at a proficiency level 4 or 5. Those are facts. Those are not our numbers. Those numbers are proven facts from various organizations. So what we do is we work through the legislative pillar to try to improve the lot and the opportunities for kids in government schools. But at the end of the day, our mission really is to help moms and dads understand really what's going on and find a way to get out, which leads us to our second pillar, which is a community focus. We are building what we call Kids First teams. The notion behind there is local teams that are engaging their whole community, not just their school boards, but their whole community in helping understand what's going on in our schools and finding alternatives. And that leads to the third pillar, which is solutions. We've been very supportive of Florida's scholarship programs, which are ways to get out. We've been particularly strong advocate for the Hope Scholarship, which is an amazing opportunity for any parent who believes their child is being bullied by the school system. And this year we've kicked off a major initiative to help moms and dads, Christian moms and dads, build one-room schoolhouses, minis, micros. And so we're building a grassroots coalition of ambassadors, think of them as consultants, to come alongside parents and find a way to get their kids out of government schools.
Right. I'm Roger Gannam. I work for Liberty Counsel, and we are a Christian litigation, education, and public policy organization. I personally work on the litigation side of that, handling constitutional, religious liberty, and free speech litigation around the country, from Florida to Hawaii to Maine and everywhere in between. We stay very busy. Right here in Florida, we've enjoyed some recent victories involving counseling bans where young people are prohibited from going to see a psychologist or just having some therapy to deal with unwanted or gender confusion, and thankfully we were able to get some good decisions that made those types of counseling bans illegal throughout Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. And because of some other litigation related to that, it'll probably go to the Supreme Court. So that's just one example, but we definitely want to represent families, Christian families who run into bad laws, bad regulation, and restrictions on their religious liberty and free speech.
Hi, I'm Patty Sullivan with Parental Rights Florida, and our national organization was founded by Michael Ferris, who also founded HSLDA. In 2012, my husband and I became the grassroots leaders for Parental Rights Florida. Non-for-profit, we're not a 501c3 or a 501c4. We felt very strongly at the time we were just parents, and we were approaching different legislators for a number of years to get simple parents' rights, common sense language passed. Basically, parental rights are a fundamental right to determine what's in the best interest of your own children in regard to their upbringing, their well-being, and their education. And we kept approaching different legislators throughout the years. Finally, in 2018, we brought it to our representative, now Senator Grahl, and she took our little paragraph and created the Parents' Bill of Rights. And we do have our paragraph in there, by the way. And so it did take us 3 years to begin to get to a place where that bill finally passed. And there was a lot of disappointment, a lot of pain in the midst of all of that, including watching it be sabotaged by people in my own party in the second year of that movement. I grew a lot, I saw a lot, and I also began to see the different opposition groups in that setting. And after thousands of hours of research as a mom, just a simple mom, we were also uncovered a lot of things that were happening in the school districts. One of the videos I found is being used in a federal lawsuit right now for January Littlejohn in her case. And again, it was just because we began to pay attention and started to do research behind the scenes and find those things. And so anyway, the bill passed at just the right time as things were happening in the public school education system throughout the nation. But now what we're working on, and this little booklet here is to help parents understand the Parents' Bill of Rights. I put it into common language. And then right now we are pushing for a federal amendment to the U.S. Constitution, working with organizations. We have a Congresswoman Lesko from Arizona who has it reintroduced. That was originally the reason we started the organization, was to push back on the UN Treaty of the Rights of the Child. So we are looking to get this parental rights amendment put on the U.S. Constitution. We have two Florida congressmen logged on as co-sponsors already, and every Florida parent can go to our website and find your district representative, your congressman or congresswoman, and call them. We make it easy, give you the language. So that is our new push right now, along with continuing to fight for parental rights here in Florida, because many levels of government and organizations and entities need to come up with speed in changing how they view their involvement with our children. So
We'll go ahead and get our questions, start with our panel with our questions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of direct this question to one of our panelists, but I would also like any other panelists to chime in on this question. What we've seen in the way of relativism in our nation, more than I have ever seen before, is the attack is not necessarily on the adults. The attack is becoming on young people. And the question I have is this: how do we defend families from these attacks when society is actually using the young people to instill in young people that there are no absolutes? It's a direct contrast and a direct contradiction to families. And the question I would have is how can we as parents defend that? And I'm going to go ahead and start with Patty to start off with that conversation.
I mean, I think initially we need what we began to see in as we pushed forward with these Parents' Bill of Rights. Parents, especially younger parents, 20s and 30s, that's one of the reasons I ended up putting this little booklet together, is because they knew something was wrong, but they couldn't quite put their finger on it. And there seems to be like a bit of a gap in their understanding of parental rights themselves. and then which transfers into their ability to have responsibility as parents as well. So parental rights and parental responsibility go hand in hand. So I would say part of that pushback is to actually develop some ways of reaching parents and giving and encouraging them to grow in their skill and their development and understanding not only what parental rights are, but actually their parental responsibility to raise their children, that even though they may be in public school, they may be in private school, they may be in charter school, they may be in homeschool, but they're still ultimately responsible to oversee and know what their children are being taught.
I think it's important, the notion of relativism, and as it's been discussed in the past, is I think somewhat hard for parents to wrap their minds around. What we're seeing today in public schools is an extension of critical race theory. It's called social emotional learning, and it starts in pre-K. And I like to put a simple definition on that, and you've touched on it a bit, Randy. Social emotional learning is a clear statement that there are no absolute truths, only your individual truths that you believe in, and facts don't matter. And when you start teaching that to very young children, they lose all perspective of character. And so I think we have some tools in Florida. The Hope Scholarship is a great one. If you're a parent and you believe your child is being threatened by social emotional learning or frankly anything going on, all you have to do is file a complaint, and you can and sign a one-page notification form, and you can get up to an $8,000 scholarship to send your child to a private school in Florida. But I think the big issue is we have to help parents understand what it is and then give them some tools to deal with it. And most parents don't believe it's going on. So I think that's the challenge.
Okay, yeah, I would just like to add that I think it's important that parents equip themselves spiritually and morally. What we're seeing is an attack from the left. They want to tear down our country, and they do that. They tear down society by tearing down our culture. And if we ourselves are not equipped and understand what their motivation is, I think Keith brought up CRT. One of the things that the proponents of CRT are trying to do is to tear down the nuclear family. And by doing that, they can get a foothold in, and basically they're looking for cultural decay. They want to see our country in decline so that they can rebuild it in the Marxist ideology. So I think parents need to understand that's the motivation. And not only do they have to equip themselves morally and socially, but they also have to activate. And it's not enough just to say, hey, there's things wrong. They need to get involved, and that might be teeing up my person here on the right. But
I want to back up to something, the social emotional learning. I remember when that term came out, and it sounds like a really nice term. It sounds like that it should be part of the education process. But that term is not what it is described. And many, many times, the attack is they're using words that have nothing to do with what the terms and the words mean. They're redefining terms. And I think you hit on something, Keith, on the social emotional. I remember us fighting that issue in education in the state of Florida for years. And because parents wouldn't, they're like, well, don't you want your child to be educated and understand, how to, socially interact with other students? That's not what this is about. That's not what this is about. And I appreciate basically there is a drive. It is a drive to completely destroy the family so they can rebuild it on a socialistic, communistic agenda. And I'm dead on. I think you all are both dead on that. Is there any other comments y'all want to make on that? The next question is this, and I have personally seen this in education. Families are, for some reason, tend to ignore the technology boom, and they're giving their children at younger ages the technology such as cell phones, smartphones, and things of that nature. And I don't think they understand the damage that it's causing to our young people and some of these other social platforms that young people are on. And the question I have to the panel is, what do we do about that? How can we get across to our families that this is one of the most damaging things that's happening to our young people? Because it's in my opinion, it's completely deprogramming them and desensitizing them to cultural morality as we would know it. So does anybody have any discussion on that?
Well, I mean, you can tell that I'm a kid of the 80s when I say this, but just say no, be a hero. And that was kind of a, say no to drugs part of it. Just say no. I recently did some research on this. 89% of women have a Facebook page. And of those women, they spend an average of 2 hours a day on social media. The average adult spends 2 hours a day on social media. If our parents are doing it, our kids are following suit. And I'll be the first as a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old to limit technology as much as I can, because it's highly addictive. In fact, when I was doing some research on it for children in Asian countries, that's an actual addiction now, that they are addicted to electronics. Their children have been on it so much that they cannot function without having screen time. So we've put things into our, that's the whole way. And if you really study anybody who's come in and taken over I'll just go to Hitler. If you look at his main thing was, if we can get them in preschool, we can get them. So that's the whole point. Everything is pushed, and it's so hard. I mean, here we're at the homeschool convention, and there's so many faith-based electronic things, and we're not going to get away from it because our entire society is built on technology now. It is, unfortunately. I mean, even when we say 89% of women are on Facebook, all of our groups have Facebook pages because that's the way to reach that market. That's how we communicate with people. It's become a whole new thing, and we're not going to get away from it. Our children are not going to get away from it. But I agree, as we see, I'm seeing second and third graders come to church with cell phones. Second and third graders. That is completely uncensored content that they're getting. They can get on the internet as fast as we can. My husband and I just had a whole conversation about, we have an iPad, and I turn it all off, and he said, well, he's going to figure that out in like 5 how to turn it back on. So I guess even more, it's hard as Christians. I remember growing up, and we weren't allowed to go to the movies growing up, and I feel emotionally scarred from that. No, I don't. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't really miss out that much that I didn't go to the movies. Like, I'm just saying my parents said no, and it didn't really end up hurting me. So I think on that, we're not going to be able to get away from it. It's there. We do want our children to know about technology, but make sure you're guarding. I could tell you stories of homeschoolers, good homeschool families, who their kids were on Discord or different things and just went down that road. So I think that's part of what Keith is saying too, educating, standing up and saying this is wrong, like the pastors did in the 80s, and continue to do that and just advocate for it.
I would agree with that. What we did in our home, and of course my children are a little older, my youngest is 24, so we didn't have the smartphones at the very young age, but we had one central computer that was facing outward so that, mom and dad were constantly walking by. We knew what the kids were doing online. But it is getting harder and harder with the advent of cell phones, but I think it's right. We do have to say no sometimes. Look at the apps. TikTok is, one of the things we look at is the influence of communist China, and that's one of the areas. And we were really glad to see a bill pass in the Florida legislature that bans TikTok from government-owned devices. We're basically in a proxy war with China, and they're using that as a spy tool, and they're also using it to spread propaganda among our youth. What they're doing on social media, on TikTok, is they're promoting math and engineering to the Chinese, but twerking and porn to anyone in another country. So it's insidious what they're doing. Big tech is going along with it. Apple disabled AirDrop at the request of the Communist Chinese that would allow the freedom seekers to communicate and get by the government censors. And by doing that, Apple caved in. China's the only country that they're doing that to. So, but yeah, social media can be very insidious. They say 6% of the Instagram users, teenage children that use Instagram, have suicidal thoughts. It harms their body image. So there's really good reasons why parents just need to say no. And yeah, it's going to hurt, but it's the best thing for them.
Patty, you mentioned Senator Grahl, who did amazing work on the Parents' Rights Bill. I'm sure you're aware of the bill she put forward this year, 1620, which was an amazing bill that deals directly with this whole issue of how the electromagnetic fields that are coming off of these devices are damaging young kids' minds. And she put that forth. And unfortunately, it didn't get a lot of traction. I think it ended up running into some headwinds in the House, which surprised me. But we need to get behind that effort next year. I talked to her last week. She's going to run that bill again. She may break it into a couple of pieces, but we need to get behind her and support that, because it'll go a long way towards prohibiting the use of these devices in our schools, which then will set a precedent and a tone for families to have some backbone when they just say no.
I just want to add a couple of maybe practical thoughts. I have a son who just graduated from college and a daughter who just graduated from high school. And so he sort of missed the whole TikTok thing, but my daughter, kind of is going through high school right in the thick of it. And I was just listening this morning to some interviews with some 15-year-olds about, I think it's Montana that banned TikTok, and asking 15-year-olds their reactions. And it was interesting. They said, well, I know TikTok's a problem and I shouldn't be on it so much, but I don't want anyone telling me I can't be on it. It's classic, teenager response. But I do think teenagers are listening, and we can have communication with them. We have conversations with them. This is really important within families to talk about what the dangers are, so that they can hear that from their parents, people they trust, and to some extent self-regulate. Now, they still need our guidance, and so the other practical thing is finding replacement activities, encouraging family activities, encouraging work, for teenagers in particular, encouraging sort of vocational things or hobbies, things that will replace that social media time with something that's more beneficial, can be a good way to counteract it, because it's here to stay, I'm afraid, and it's always going to be available to them. And one thing you have to look out for is many teachers, even in schools, are using Snapchat and social media to communicate assignments and keep kids on track in school. So they really can't get away from it in the classroom even, but at home we can have, I think, healthy conversations. And really, as parents, we need to know what these applications do, really learn the technology ourselves, and then be able to have conversations about what it's doing to them.
And I just want to add to what everybody had said here is I want to, as an encouragement to families and parents who may be watching, it is never too late to start. So if there has been, if some of this has been happening in your home, now is a good time to start all over again. And so don't let the past issues of what may have happened with your children being on these different apps and these different things, or even your own issues of addiction toward technology or these things like that, keep you from moving forward and making a shift and a change. It is never too late. It's about recreating these boundaries within our families. In the area of tech, find somebody who understands it. If you don't understand it, look at these applications that are on these phones. There are hidden applications. There are lists on different websites, family-friendly websites, that show you what's actually happening in these different apps. So take time as a parent. Some of us grew up in broken homes, which I was one of those people. So I had those things, different ways of relating, but that did not keep me from making a choice to get the skills to be a good parent and to make my marriage work, and then also do those things technology-wise of helping my daughter make right decisions and right choices. And so saying no is a good thing. I fortunately had a very compliant child that really didn't have those propensities, but at the same time, there were times we had to make those decisions to to help bring guidance, turning things off, very practical steps and tips of turning phones away, turning them off or putting them away for a day, and just being intentional about your relationship with your children. It is never too late to start over again with them.
Roger, I have a question for you down this same line. On a lot of your social media platforms, there are, and it's increasing, a lot of pornographic material on these platforms. And is there any way from a legislative standpoint, from a legal standpoint, can we keep that away from children?
It's a great question. Throughout our history, there have been various legislative attempts to stop pornography, to stop strip clubs and things like that. And the same First Amendment that we defend for our religious liberty and our religious speech is used as a shield for much pornographic content under the label of expression. So I think that legislatively, I think the goal and really the tactic is to push as hard as possible and try to influence our legislators to push as hard as possible to limit the kinds of materials that can get into the hands of children, because that's what we're seeing is an area where children they do have some rights to sort of guide what they read and take in, but no one would think that it's permissible to put Playboys. Well, I should say no one. Most people would agree it's not permissible to put Playboys and things like that in an elementary school library. People will say, "Oh, you want to engage in censorship," and well, absolutely, we decide what is appropriate for young children and their school libraries, and we've seen a lot of that successfully legislated in Florida this year. I think we can try to do the same thing as far as children's access to that kind of content on social media, through age restrictions. I think that there is room in the law for that. I think it's absolutely constitutional to give parents the ability to control what their children read and what they consume. And so if we can, I think, focus on age restrictions on social media, that would be an area to focus on to try to stop some of this access. But it also takes a lot of vigilance on the parts of parents to know what kinds of parental controls they can activate on their devices and within their Wi-Fi networks in their homes and things like that, to also provide restrictions that are more local.
First of all, I'm not a lawyer, so I have to preface this. We've had two major efforts, and we're going to continue them, and we would appreciate all of your support. We have an obscenity statute, 847. It has the Miller test in it, which most people don't know what the Miller test is, but it was handed down to us from a Supreme Court decision. For parents, for adults, and 30-some states adopted that and pulled it into the law we have for minors. And what it does is that in the ALA, the American Lawyers Library Association, uses it to the hilt. What they do is if they can get a material to win an award, it demonstrates that it has literary value. That Miller test has no business in our obscenity laws, so we're going to mount an effort. We appreciate all your support to do that. The other thing is, for 2 years now, we've tried to get an opt-in for sexually explicit material versus an opt-out, so that all the power's in the hands of the parents. I thought we're going to get it done this year. We had a hiccup at the last minute in the House. We're going to be back on that, over that target next year. So those are two things that we can do, and with a groundswell of grassroots support, I think we have a good shot of doing both.
Well, that was media, and now let's go into entertainment. And basically, the attacks, not just in social media, is happening, but it's also happening openly in entertainment. One of my colleagues yesterday, I was talking to him on the phone, and he had made a list. He's been working on just television shows alone. He made a list of 5 pages of television shows that were promoting LGBT agendas, promoting some kind or some kind of a socialism philosophy. 5 pages of that. And in fact, he was supposed to do those and work on movies, and he didn't even get to the movies just because of that. So the next question I have is not just in movies, television shows. It's happening in entertainment parks. Disney has been a huge focus in Florida alone just this past year. Legoland. Everywhere you turn, there's entertainment being pushed, and it's specifically being pushed on young people, on children. Legoland. How many adults go to Legoland? I mean, you're going there because you obviously have children there. So the question is, again, what do we do? How do we go through this minefield with our young people? Is it we continue going to these locations, these places, continue taking kids to movies and then telling them this is not appropriate? Or how do we handle that?
Well, this is personally ruining my life and sucking my will to live. As the mom of little kids, really, truly, I mean, we watch Toy Story and Buzz Lightyear, and that's fun. And this is part of my childhood and part of your children's childhood. I mean, Toy Story, Winnie the Pooh, these things that we thought Disney was safe. It was safe for our children to watch. That's what, the Sunday night movie, my parents used to record it so that we could watch it. This is part of my childhood. These are things I grew up with. So they take something like, Cars, which is I have 2 little boys. Every little boy's dream, the toys that we play with, the things we, as small children, Buzz Lightyear specifically, and then come out and have a part in a movie where we can't even watch that movie, and we're not targeting 12, 15-year-olds. These are cartoons. This is specifically for, if you look at Toy Story movies, that's a 3 to 7-year-old. Who buys those stuffed animals? Who does that? So we're marketing younger and younger children, and it's really sad for me. It breaks my heart. Also, I live down the street from Legoland, so that also ruins my life. And we live near Disney, so these things, it hurts. It's close. So where do we go? I mean, we know it's entertainment. Like I said, my parents didn't let us go to movies, but those were part of our life. Entertainment is part of our life. So are we going to have to go to where you can't watch TV? Because I personally have to screen almost every TV show my kids watch. And then you could screen it, Pete the Cat. Pete the Cat is been a reading series for years and they were simple words, and you taught your kids how to read from Pete the Cat, and all of a sudden it now has an agenda. And so I feel like the push is going to have to be for more Christian entertainment. We used to have VeggieTales. That's kind of gone away. What happened to our organizations that were really pushing that Christian content that we could let our kids watch? We can't even watch VeggieTales now, and I'm not sure about the new VeggieTales coming out. So it's a hard one. Like, this hits home to me really hard because I love movies. I enjoy watching movies. That's, part of my childhood growing up. The things that we let slip in the past, we now can't, and we have to screen everything. And even having the thing that says, okay, here's the list. The list is this big. This is how many. I mean, there's hardly anything that doesn't have that agenda, and it breaks my heart, as a mom, because saying no is hard. Because with Toy Story pushing a bad agenda, there's Mr. Potato Head. That's part of Toy Story. There's, so many iconic things that get pushed with that. So I think that's such a personal choice for parents, and I feel like it's a sacrifice. And a little heartbreaking for me to have to do that. As kids get older, they make better choices. They don't have to. But this is really affecting our younger moms, and moms having to decide how much do we say no to. Does that make sense? It's hard to do that.
Yeah, and I think it is up to the families, the parents, to decide from a public policy perspective. It's one thing to ban TikTok from government-owned devices. It's another thing to, ban it, on privately held ones. So it's a little more difficult. You want to, you just have to balance for example, the First Amendment with, banning certain forms of entertainment that you may not agree with. But there are ways to do it. I know there was a bill last session, it was HB 1438, where it banned children from venues that are showing explicit adult entertainment or a strip club. So there are ways to do it, but it's not as cut and dry as mom and dad, again, saying no to that form of entertainment and finding the alternative, especially the Christian base, that are going to uplift and give values to your children.
Can I also say too, just a thought, and as we, with your young children too, it's helping moms understand how to do that too. That's more of the educating with it, because moms like me are sitting, well, what do we do? What am I supposed to do if I want to? If we cut out all this, where am I supposed to go? What's the next step? And people do want to, do that. But again, for some people, it is a huge sacrifice. Even our Christian schools, we've shown these movies for years as entertainment in our schools. So, what is the alternative? We don't have anything to slide in there.
I want to kind of add to that just a little bit. When my kids were growing up, I have one in the room, so I have to be careful what I say. But I remember watching Dumbo, and I had no idea Dumbo was flying. It wasn't because of his ears, it was because he was drunk. I did not know that. And I was watching it with my kids, and it was did you just learn that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just did. You just
okay.
ruined it for me.
I'm sorry. Well, I was watching it with my kids, and I'm like, the guy's drinking. And then he starts flying. And I thought, oh my goodness, what am I doing to my kids? I grabbed it and I ripped it out and was like, hey, well, let's go have something. Let's go do something else. I had no idea. And I'm looking back, and that's really funny, okay? But I was traumatized. I don't think our kids were, but think about what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with Dumbo getting drunk, okay? We're dealing with a lifestyle that's being sexualized on our children. That's what we're dealing with. And it's a totally different world. I remember I used to speak at education with parents and education. I would always say it's between you and God of how you educate your child. If you choose to put them in a public school, if you choose, I still say that, but I'm really being dishonest with myself anymore. I don't know how that as a parent that you can send your child to, for example, a public school for 8 hours a day and then deprogram him in the couple hours you have left. I just don't know how you do that. And I can't honestly say that. And this is one that's coming to this part is what do you do? Because, you want to, take your child to amusement park. You want for them to have fun, but then all of a sudden they are directly going after your child. And when you realize that, what do you do with that? And this is becoming more and more difficult.
And when I was a child, we didn't have to deal with this. Like, my parents didn't have to talk to me about certain things until I was 15, 16, 17. It was just never talked about. Whereas I'm going to have those conversations. Parents have to, of little kids, like a 2 and a 5-year-old, they're going to start asking me questions at an earlier age. So parents have to be ready and equipped to say, how to have those conversations now. Like, we've never, no, this is a new generation. This is a new part of parenting that people aren't talking about. So just because they're pushing it in our media, he's going to go to somebody's house and see something that I don't approve. I mean, I remember as a first grader, and I'm still scarred for life, seeing Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds at one of my friends' houses, and it ruined me from birds for the rest of my life. They might attack us at any minute. But I'm just saying, or The Blob, or one of those. That's a whole different thing, but here we are, the same concept is coming up. So I think in the conversation we need to start, older parents need to start helping the younger, I guess that's biblical, older parents helping these younger parents, saying how to do that.
We need a full restoration, between the generations. And what I had noticed with the parents in their 20s and 30s, and this is not all of them, But I am living proof of someone who didn't have it. I didn't have a reference model for that. I actually was harmed by a middle school teacher in the 70s. So, and then I came face to face with the same kind of people that had done that to me, but I was just fighting for parental rights. But what I wanted to say in the context of what you're talking about is it is not too late. It is important for parents right now to begin to get the skills and the tools. We cannot wait for someone else to do it and to hand it to us. We've been spending a lot of time putting our finger in the dike, trying to keep them from the deluge from having, and now the cracks are already there and the deluge has happened. But at the same time, we can't just keep doing that. We actually have to build and find resources where we can do the opposite, and we can be creative and not just always be on the offense or defense, I mean. And so there are resources that will help parents and to educate themselves and also with their children. There are full ministries that are available to help people who struggled with transgender issues and who were able to reconcile and come back to understanding the differences between men and women and be reconciled within. They have full ministries that are available to help parents understand this issue from a biblical perspective, and then also the struggle of confusion in these types of things. And there are full ministries for that. There are ministries to help parents understand these sexual immoral issues, dealing with homosexuality. There are resources out there that are available, and we need to access ourselves to those. We are creating a list, my family and I, my husband and I, because we work a lot with these. I used to be an affiliate to help with Exodus International, and then that went off of the cliff. But there is a Restored Hope Network now. There's Linda Seiler's Ministries. She herself dealt with transgender issues. These resources are out there. And one of the things I was really encouraged about, I spent some time in Tallahassee during the legislative session because my daughter was interning there. And, we spent years fighting against things in regards to getting things done legislatively. But one of the things I appreciated about what I saw what the First Lady had done is with this education roundtable, she had a resiliency program where it's a resiliency program where teachers and educators are going to be, actually the DOE is going to be implementing it. So they're going to have to go through these courses, let parents go through these courses where they're going to put parents back into the classrooms starting in the fall. So when I heard that, what I realized is not only were they just fighting all the woke stuff, but they were actually proactively doing something to combat it, to not be reactive but responding to it. And it comes across in these same ways with whole Starbucks and Targets. I haven't shopped in Target in 9 years. And that for me started when they decided to let anyone go into the bathrooms at any time. That was 9 years ago, and now they've come even more woke. So we have to make decisions to boycott and be willing to do those things, but also give our children and ourselves, if we don't understand these issues, we can't wait for somebody to teach us. We can't wait for somebody to come and give it to us. We have to go find these resources, but I guarantee you they are out there.
That's good. This one, Roger, I'm going to get you to start this discussion. This is the question that we have. Now we're going to government. Government organizations have created non-discriminatory laws against calling out lifestyles that one disagrees with. We see this happening in Canada and now in California. Had some discussions with some people in California about some of these non-discriminatory laws that the state has started to impose. Also, government entities identifying parents who call out school boards as domestic terrorists. We have government entities tracking phones, banking information on conservatives without a warrant. And the question I would have is, as parents, for example, I was involved real recently in a school board issue. And I'm in the back of my mind, I'm constantly thinking, am I being tracked on that? Am I being identified for that? So the question is, do we just stay out of that space? Do we just stay quiet? Or do we engage? from a legal standpoint, what can we do about that?
Well, there's certainly a lot wrapped up in this. As Christians, we are faced with multiple commands for our conduct and how we interact with the world. We're told on one hand, as much as it depends on us to live at peace with everyone, we're also told to love our neighbors. And sometimes that can give us a sense that, we should stay quiet or stay out of the way. But we also can look back to the Old Testament when the Israelites were in exile, and Jeremiah 29, when God's instructions to them, it was to build houses, work, to get married and to marry sons and daughters. But it also commanded them to seek the welfare of the city in which they lived, because in its welfare they would find their welfare. So I think that the idea of loving our neighbor requires us sometimes to speak out for the sake of our neighbors, even our neighbors who oppose us. For their good, it's our responsibility to speak out. That doesn't mean that we want to pick every fight, but it means that when we see bad policies, and I speaking to the people at this table, especially who are all activists in one sort or another, you know where I'm coming from. But when we see bad policies that harm not only our families but our neighbors' families, even if they don't know it or even if they think it's great, we have some responsibility to speak out against that. But what I want to stress is that it's great to have the resolve and the energy to fight these battles, but it's also very important how we do it, that we do it in a way that is beyond reproach. Because as people who identify as Christians, who identify with the moral authority, we are susceptible to much more attack and much more scrutiny. And I always come back to this scripture. It's in 1 Peter chapter 3. It's a scripture that says that, even if you should suffer for righteousness' sake, you will be blessed. Have no fear of them, nor be troubled, but in your heart honor Christ, the Lord is holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. We have to be reasonable. We have to know what CRT is. We have to know what social emotional learning is and what are the bad aspects of it. What are the things that are harmful? But then it goes on to says, do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if that should be God's will, than for doing evil. We have to do it the right way, and I'll just give you a couple of examples. We had a dedicated grandfather who wanted more than anything to expose the CRT influence and the social emotional learning type influence at his granddaughter's school. This is up in the Northeast, and he would go outside on the sidewalk and hand out information for meetings like these or meetings of local groups that wanted to just instruct parents and other grandparents about what's going on. But when he was challenged at one point, he didn't behave well. He cussed out the person who was challenging him, and he really behaved badly, and it's on videotape. And, when he came to us, because we want to help families and activists and people who are willing to take a stand, we couldn't take on his case because the case was going to be about how badly he behaved, and it wasn't going to be about the issues involved. If we keep our consciences clear, if we do our advocacy in the right way that's beyond reproach, people are still going to slander us. We're promised that. People are still going to say bad things about us, but it won't stick, and we'll be able to get through it and get on the other side and do things like pass, parents' bills of rights and things like that. So the answer is no, we shouldn't just stay back. You might avoid the fight for a while, but eventually it's going to come to you. We have to be prepared for it when it comes. How are you going to deal with a teacher who insists on using false pronouns? How are you going to deal with your child's interaction with another child who insists on using false pronouns? We have to be ready for that and know where are we going to draw the line and what are we going to do in response, and then do it with gentleness and respect. Do it in a way that's beyond reproach.
I also want to say that to add to that, everybody here at this table has sacrificed family time, lots of time. Every time I go out and do something, it's, they said today that you only get to do this once. We only get to have our children. We only get to do that one time. So for me to go out and work on legislation, knowing the government is making a change, it is hard. It is something you struggle with because we only get to do this once. But I try to tell people that and educate moms and say, listen, this is why we want to spend the time, because legislation, these issues aren't just for now. legislation usually lasts for 10 to 15 years. So when we put a piece of legislation in, we're ensuring that freedom, not just for me, but for the next generation. And to really push that for moms to understand, I don't really care what the political C looks like right now. I'm determined to make sure that we get some of these things put into legislation right now in Florida, specifically when we have a supermajority. That's why the legislators work so hard. Everybody rallied and we worked really hard this session. So I think when we have to really let people know that, yes, this is a sacrifice. Yes, every time you go to a meeting or every time you sit down and do research on a bill, that's time away from my family. That's time away from my children. But for me, I feel very strongly that it's not just for me, but it's for the next generation, so that my children and my children's children will be free. So it is hard for me because I sometimes struggle with, do we help the school boards? Because or are they gone? Are we just going to say peace out? In the 70s, the Christians said they took God out, and the Christians said, okay, we're out. We're going to go start our own system. So that was a huge encouragement for me too, to understand that it's not just for us, it's for, next generation.
Karen, I've got a kind of question down the same line. Again, the attacks, I looked at some of the parents on these school boards. They're upset. They're mad. And, I don't think it's appropriate to cuss somebody out. So, but I do think that conservatives, Christians are being targeted by our government. Tracking phone and bank information, that just came out in a whistleblower with the FBI. Is our government broken?
Well, definitely our government needs to be watched and, yes, at times thrown out of office. And that's why we need to have courage that we outnumber them, but we have to organize and in order to be effective. But yeah, you look at all aspects of what they're doing. They're proposing now to do central bank digital currency. Oh my, it's one thing to have cryptocurrency. I don't understand that too much, but I do know that it's loosely distributed. It's not, under the control of the government. But do we want to give the government control and power to, they see a posting on social media they don't like and be able to, with a flip of a switch, basically drain your bank account through the central currency. So we need to put controls in place. When we see things like that, when the FBI is targeting parents who speak out at school boards, just know that sunlight is the best disinfectant. We need to make everybody know we outnumber them, and so we've got to organize. We've got to activate. It's one thing to, like I said earlier, equip yourselves spiritually. Train your family correctly. But we're always going to have to constantly, it's eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. And, we the people have to oversee our government because their tendency is to take away our freedom and rob us of our liberties.
In the final moments, let's talk about education. Let's talk about the good stuff. The postmodern influences come in many, many forms, and education is obviously a big influence. And I think if there's anything that you can say good about COVID, it's probably that. Because I think it was a wake-up call for parents. I think that many parents were actually watching the Zoom classrooms that their children were on. I think they actually saw what was really going on in the classrooms. And as a result of that, I think that parents started rising up. I think that's a result of angry parents at school boards. I think that's a lot of it. But as parents, from a biblical worldview, what do we do? There are all kinds of opportunities in education now that wasn't there. Even when we raised our children, we homeschooled them, and we were up against a lot of barriers. And to be honest about it, a lot of them were family barriers. They weren't necessarily government, but families like, you're crazy. What are you doing? You can't do that. You can't put two sentences together, much less educate your child. And so the question is, what are the opportunities that parents now have to get their kids out of public schools? And I'm just going to be really just gut honest that I think that I don't think there's an option anymore in public school system. And I think that our legislature in the state of Florida has realized that, and I think that's the reason they've opened up the opportunities that they have for parents to educate their children.
Well, I mean, if you do look at history, public education was basically doing exactly what it was designed to do, and that was to indoctrinate and separate our children from us. And so, I mean, I am pretty much a purist when it comes to that. I do believe in homeschooling. I think we need to be educating our school at home. So I'm a product of public school, and it took me a long time to get unindoctrinated, and a lot of that actually happened as I was educating my own child. And so I think the proactive ways that people are, like what Keith is doing with some of the micro schools. We have private schools that are, coming to fruition. There, I saw one area in our community, some of the public school moms that left, they took their kids out because of COVID and what had happened to their children, started homeschooling their children, started working together, created a micro school. It just emerged and developed. These are those proactive ways that we can come together, not only as one family, but as a collective of families. It's the new version of co-ops. I mean, we could still continue to have co-ops, but we can have micro schools, we can have hybrid schools where we're actually helping one another educate our children, and then that way you have the parental influence and the parental oversight side by side with other parents who have your same values in mind, who you can trust with your children. I highly recommend that even in those settings right now, even with Christian organizations and those types of things, it's very important that they update their policies, procedures, and protocols where they are honoring and the parents in those situations. One of the colleges, the college that my daughter will be attending, gave me an example of this, and I think that every micro school, any homeschooling co-op, or whatever it may be, in the way of the future, one of the biggest changes that we can make is this: the college that she's attending. I went to their accepted students day, and they had a panel, and I asked the students, and it's a well-known Christian, doesn't take federal funding college, and I asked them, I said, even though my daughter is going to be a college student here, what does your faculty, what does your school, what is the dynamics of your school, where even if you have these adult young people in your care, what are you still doing to make sure that you're engaged with their parents and that you are encouraging them as 18 to 22-year-olds to continue to stay engaged with their parents? And it was mind-blowing. They literally, after some of the students answered, one of the people actually said, if you notice, anytime your child gets an email from us, you're CC'd in on that. They're still including the parents in that setting. So any micro school, anything that we do with our children in the future, whether it's homeschool, co-ops, or whatever, we should be putting the Parents' Bill of Rights in that, and making sure that every parent's rights are going to be honored and respected in however we're educating their children and helping them along with their children. I think it's very important that we change those guidelines, we change those protocols and policies and procedures. And I've been working with multiple organizations that work with teenagers, and I've made different kind of advice and input for them to change certain protocols and cracks that were in the system where they were withholding information from parents without even realizing it.
Karen, you said it perfectly. Our schools are Marxist. And what we really need to do is help parents understand that when they send their children to Caesar, they get Caesar back, right? And I use the term Marxist in my school board meetings, and I get looked at like I'm nuts. People really don't understand that our education system is now controlled by the Marxist unions, and their sole mission is to tear down the family values. And until we can help parents understand that, the fear that they have in terms of breaking out and starting a micro school or doing a co-op. I had a doctor 2 months ago, a young mom, tell me that she wasn't smart enough to educate her child. That's because we've been schooled. For those of you who know Sam Sorbo, that's one of her favorite topics. We've got to unschool ourselves and realize, and then help those parents come alongside them. The other big challenge we have, and I told you I wasn't a lawyer, I'm also not a pastor, but I tell you the pastors in this country have to wake up. They have to wake up, and they got to stop dealing with the religious lane and start dealing with Scripture and the Bible as it relates to our culture. And until that happens, until that awakening really happens, and I'm beginning to see some signs of it, but we need to help them. And sometimes it's tough, and it's hard not to be gentle when you do that.
I want to close with this, and we were homeschooling our kids when they were smaller, and we were concerned we were going to ruin our children. We were very concerned about that. And somebody came alongside of us that was extremely successful homeschooling their children. They had, I think, 7 children. And they said this. They said, Randy, if you care about your children, your worst day as a homeschooler is going to be better than any public school can ever experience. And I'll never forget that, because there were days that we felt that way. We felt like we were ruining our kids. But by the grace of God, it was successful. And I want to just encourage, homeschoolers, whatever avenue you choose you are in charge of your children's education. You are in charge. Nobody else is. God gave you that responsibility. And I trust that you take it extremely seriously and understand what we're doing. Thank you again. It's Randy Osborne, Worldview Truth. It's on your favorite podcast. And I will be posting not only on that podcast, but I'll be posting all the websites to the panel here today. So thank you, and God bless y'all. Worldview Truth.